everybody. Last night, Rachel and I shared with the group what girls should be looking for in a future boyfriend. Some characteristics that they want to find and some characteristics that they should be aware of that could be red flags in a future relationship. Rachel shares a lot of personal stories and some things that she's learned along the way. And it's been a great series so far. We hope you're enjoying this relationship series. Leave us some love down below. Leave us a comment. Let us know how this is ministering to you or what you got out of this message. So we're going to get right into this, and Rachel's going to share with us the first thing that you should not see in a future boyfriend or fiance or husband.
Yes, I have a lot of stories, sadly. None of these stories are of Michael, so that's good. But a lot of them, yeah, I just dated wrong people. But the first thing when I was thinking about like what to find in a godly man was actually a lot of negative things. So I asked Michael if I could just say what not to find in a man, and he would do what to find. But the first and biggest thing that you don't want to find is someone who's manipulative. Things aren't always going to go how you want them to be, but a godly man doesn't try to maneuver situations to go his way over God's way. And sadly, like every guy that I dated or was my boyfriend, I say that in quotes because I've only had 2 actual boyfriends, and you'll hear more about why that is later on. Michael was my second one with the actual title. But like I had so many stories, but the biggest one that stood out to me was when I decided to go back to Bible college. I had gone away to college in Pennsylvania, and then like I hated it there, so I decided to come back home. And when I came back home, I started to date a guy that I had previously dated. I'm trying not to say their names because some of them are creepy and still follow me on social media and know that we have YouTube and stuff like that. So shout out to you guys for ruining my life. What?
I'm glad I'm not part of that list.
I don't follow them. They follow me. But anyways, so I decided I wanted to go back to college. And like our relationship wasn't like healthy in the fact that he was like super controlling and like tried to like dictate me how I should run my life. And he always consistently told me that my decision was so horrible and that I wouldn't succeed and that it was just a waste of time and that I was choosing to ruin our relationship just because I was wanting to go to a different state and wanting to go to Bible college. And I didn't want to help him succeed. And so basically I was just so worthless and that I wouldn't amount to anything in my life. That was a big point that I missed, but he wanted me to like help push him to follow his dreams, which he didn't really have any. He only had them if I suggested something, like found the connections for him to succeed in that. Like he was pretty lazy and like didn't do anything except for treat me like crap. But he just always told me that I was awful human, and he kept giving me ultimatums. Like when I went away to college, the day that I left, I got text messages every day and phone calls and voicemails saying like how like worthless I was and what a piece of trash I was for leaving him. Just trying to like break me down so that I would come back and be with him, because he just tried to belittle me so much and make me feel so little to hopefully get me to cling to him more, because to like try and prove myself to him. And so he just always did that to try and manipulate me, but on a much grander scale of manipulation. I always think of the story of King David, when he used his power to have his way with somebody. And then he also used his power to then kill her husband so that he could cover up what his manipulation was. He used his power to have his way with a woman when he shouldn't have.
So the first thing you don't want in a guy is manipulative, right?
Yeah.
The first thing you do want in a guy is you want a guy who perseveres or is perseverant. James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Listen, life is going to come at you. Not once, not twice, multiple times. There's going to be multiple challenges in your life. And there's going to be setbacks, and there's going to be times where you feel like you've just been knocked flat on your back, and even in relationships. And it's going to test your spirit, and it's going to test your love, and it's going to test your faith. And so you want someone by your side that's going to persevere because it's important for you. You want somebody who is going to be a role model in your family of perseverance. Because eventually when you get married, right, because the whole purpose in dating is getting married, eventually you're going to want that person to be able to persevere, because there's going to be times in your life where you're going to have setbacks, you're going to be challenged, you may go through a financial situation, you may go through a sickness, you may go through countless of other things, but you want a guy who perseveres. And so when you're looking for the guy that you're thinking about dating, look how he responds to challenging situations. Look how he responds to challenging situations. Does he back away from them? Does he not acknowledge them? Or does he go at them head on and be willing to push forward? Because you want a guy who's not going to give up quickly, and you want a guy who's going to trust that God's going to make a way.
Another thing that you don't want is someone who's controlling. A godly man isn't someone who's a dictator. He's not someone who thrives on being bossy and not allowing their girlfriend/wife freedom to be their own person. You still want to be yourself and true in the relationship. Same boyfriend, okay? There's gonna be a lot of stories about him. But he always tried to control me, kind of like you heard in the previous story, but he always told me what I can and can't do, who I can and cannot hang out with, and I was very respectful to him. I never hung out with guys. I never communicated with other guys, even though a lot of my close friends were guys. And I just told him, I said, hey, I'm trying to be respectful, and just ended ties with them. So I always hung out with my girlfriends and stuff. We've been friends since high school. And this story, I'm if I should have just left then, because I was hanging out in my friend's apartment. I was in 20 years old. I don't know. I was early 20s, because obviously I'm only 27. But and he drove to her house because I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to put my phone on silent. I'm not going to respond because I just want to spend quality time with my girlfriends, because I haven't seen them in a while, because he very rarely let me go hang out with them. And so I was okay, I have this one chance to do it, so I'm going to invest all my time in them. He drove to her apartment, which I have no clue how he even knew where it was. Drove to her apartment, knocked on the door, and said, hey, it's time to go. And I was what? You're kidding, right? But no, he wasn't. And so just to not cause any drama, and because my girlfriends, they would have ripped him to shreds and stuff like that. I just said, okay, I'll leave, whatever. So I get in my car to drive home. He follows me to my house, and he's just okay, so what do you want to do? We can hang out now, right? And I was no. I'm going to go to bed. But then he texted me that night, and he was just you should have hung out with me. You shouldn't be hanging out with them. They're not a good influence on you, which they weren't bad people. They weren't the greatest, but they were better than him. So I was just no, you cannot tell me who I can and can't hang out with. That's just not okay, because I've been friends with them for forever. They got my back. They pushed me to be a better person, and all these things. And this was the situation of many where he used his power and authority, because he was the man in the relationship, to just tell me what I can and can't do. And I should have never allowed him. I should have just left him right then.
Second thing you want to look for in a man, or you men should be for a girl, is focused on God's word. Focused on God's word. Hebrews 2:1 says, we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. In Christian marriages, the husband is called to be the head of the household. That's the way God established it. That's what he created. The husband is supposed to be the head of the household, wearing the head of Christ, not literally, figuratively, but to represent Christ in that marriage. Because submission is a sensitive topic with women, one of the ways to ensure that you're going to enjoy submitting to your future husband is to understand and know that he's attentive and focused on the Word of God. It will be so much easier for you to submit to his authority as head of the household when you know that he's a man of the word, when he's a man that studies the word. It's easy to get distracted by false teaching and our own worldly desires, but a godly man is committed to following and obeying Jesus while single, and it's going to be easier to submit to him later in a marriage.
Yeah, don't be a jerk. And something else that you don't want in your future spouse, boyfriend, whatever, is someone who's not wise. God has blessed us with so much, and we just need to be diligent about how we use those and what we do with them, especially with our money and time. One of the biggest things that sticks out to me is one of my family friends. He was so head over heels for his girlfriend, and she was still in high school, and he was just out of college. Just in college. They're like 2 years apart. But he wanted to dote on her so much that he went into financial debt. He was in debt for over $5,000. And he wasn't working a well-paying job. Like, he couldn't pay off his credit card, so it just kept building interest. And in the long run, it ruined their relationship because he couldn't buy her any more things, and it brought bitterness in the relationship between the both of them. And he was always so angry and annoyed with everyone around him who seemed to have joy because he, sorry, that was the nursery, because he was drowning in debt and he had a false relationship. So he didn't have the joy that he could have in the relationship because money owned him. And he wasn't generous. He was so unwise. He couldn't even spend time with his friends because he had to just keep working and working and working to try and pay off his debt. But he didn't have. And the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 5:10, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. And also along with money is time. Same boyfriend as before. Sorry. Yeah. There was a lot of signs that I should have left him. And then we actually dated before in high school, and then I was stupid and dated him again when I was in college. And I should have never tried to do it again because the first time we dated, he never made time for anybody. It was always on his schedule when he wanted to do things. If you weren't ready, you had to be ready right then. Or he would just manipulate you to tell you that you're worthless and that you should I'm ready, so come now, kind of a deal. The biggest story that stuck out in my mind was when we were in high school and he invited me to come over to his house for his birthday. And he said he would pick me up at 5 or 6 in the evening. And his birthday's in the summer, so I never had a curfew anyways, but it didn't mean anything. And he never showed up. He didn't communicate, nothing. I texted him and said, hey, are you still planning on picking me up? He ghosted me, didn't respond. I tried calling him an hour later. He never responded. And then finally around 8 or 9 o'clock at night, he pulled up to my house, slammed on his horn, and texted me and said, I'm here. Get your butt out here. I was like, oh, okay. But I was stupid. I did it. I went out, hung out with him. But stuff like that happened all the time. If he made plans with me, he would always have an excuse and be like, oh, I forgot I'm playing video games, or I'm going to play basketball with the guys and stuff like that. And it's okay to have time with your friends and stuff, but just make time and stay and keep your plans and don't waste other people's, because I could have done so many better things with my life.
The next thing that you want to look for in a godly man, or godly man you should be, is generosity. 2 Corinthians 9:6 says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. An attitude of giving shows itself in a relationship. A man who enjoys giving will have less difficulty to let go of money or material possessions. A God-fearing man knows that his riches are earthly, that they don't belong to him, that they all come from God. He worries less about money, and he knows that God can provide and meet his needs at all times. It's an important quality of a godly husband because your future marriage, you will want to be with someone that willingly gives, not just to you, but to the people around you. When you have a husband or a godly man who is generous and willing to give, and that gives generously, that man is going to attract other people in a good way, not physical way or like a relationship way, but he's going to attract people in a community, like at a church, and those people that he attracts are going to be a blessing to you and to your family. And so you want to look for a guy who is going to be generous.
Yeah, you don't want to find someone who's not responsible. You don't want them to be irresponsible. You don't want them to be relying on others for financial support. They can't keep a job, and they don't take pride in their responsibilities, and they just do it to the bare minimum. Even like in high school, like you can tell how their future is going to lay out for them and how diligent they are in their schoolwork, in their sports, and their extracurricular activities, with their chores at home, and things like that. Finally, on to a different guy. I hung out with in college. He had zero ambition or responsibilities. He would just barely go to class, and he like hardly ever did his homework unless I was like, hey, do you want to come to the library and work on homework with me? And he would come, and he would just literally do the bare minimum so that he wouldn't fail the class. But like he never wanted, he was just going to college just to go to college because his parents made him pretty much, otherwise they wouldn't give him money. So he was just going there. And he always has an excuse for why he wouldn't push himself, why he wouldn't like thrive and find ambitions for anything. And his excuses always followed him, and eventually it came out where I like had caught him talking to another girl, and he always justified it. He's like, we're not official boyfriend and girlfriend because at our college, like if you had the title boyfriend and girlfriend, they put the label on like, oh, you're getting married. Like it was a super conservative college. Like you couldn't, yeah, it was horrible. So we just never put the label on it. And he always justified it. He's like, well, if we had that label, then I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to her. I'm just like, no, that's not acceptable. That's not okay. And it didn't make sense to me then, but it makes sense to me now. Is like he just always thought that he could have life handed to him, and he could get anything he wanted, and there was no consequence for it. And I should have just dumped him right then and there, but when you're in this situation, your eyes aren't open. But even still to this day, I'm pretty sure, like I don't keep up with him too much, but he isn't doing anything with his life. He's still living off of his parents' money and just being a bum.
So the next thing you want to look for in a godly man is responsibility. Romans 14:12 says, so then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Being responsible is a prime indicator of whether that guy is mature and wise. If he's responsible, then he's mature and wise. In a relationship, you're going to face situations where someone needs to take charge and make a decision. Not always about a restaurant where you're going to go eat, but there's going to be points in your relationship where you're going to want somebody to take charge and make a decision. And a godly man should be willing to do that spirit-led and take full responsibility for his actions. And so observe the guy that you're thinking about dating. Observe him. Does he, how does he respond under fire or under pressure? Does he own it, or does he repeatedly blame somebody or something else and brush off the responsibility? If he tends to avoid taking responsibility, remember that small decisions now are going to become big decisions later. The next thing you want to look for in a godly man is humility. You want to see a godly man who is humble. Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. There's so many reasons why humility is probably one of the most important characteristics of a godly man. One common habit of couples in healthy relationships is that both partners are able to lay aside selfishness and consider the other one's interest and well-being as more important than their own. A relationship can be challenging and confronting at times. However, only people who are able to resist the desire to always be right and are able to acknowledge their mistakes and weaknesses can solve disputes. If this person is not humble, then relationships can turn very toxic really quickly. You want the man you date to be able to apologize and put your feelings first at times. You want them to be humble. You want them to put your feelings first some of the time, not all the time, but even when they're not putting your feelings first, they're still putting it first because of how they respond to you. You don't want a guy who acts like he knows it all, has everything figured out. You want a guy who is willing to apologize, say that he screwed up, and move forward.
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
You don't want someone who's a liar. Proverbs 16:28 says, "A perverse person stirs up conflict, and gossip separates close friends." Another guy, I was kind of like, I guess I was dating him. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We would hang out and stuff like that. And he never told me he had a girlfriend. We had been hanging out. We'd been friends for a while. Okay, this was before I was a Christian. We were friends with benefits, but we didn't go full way. Okay, that just makes things easier to say. So we didn't have a title or anything like that. And he never told me that he had a girlfriend. He had got a girlfriend after 2 years of us hanging out, and he just never told me. We continued hanging out. And it made things so complicated for not just his life, but for my life, because he couldn't keep his story straight about things that we would hang out and do. He would talk about things. I was like, we never did that. And he was like, yeah, we did. I said, no, we never did. And then he told me I'm not allowed to call him boyfriend, which was fine with me because I'm like, you're not my boyfriend. That's okay. But he always made it very clear before we went to go hang out with his friends. He's like, you cannot call me your boyfriend. I'm like, okay. But he just always put stipulations on it. Or I couldn't. One time, he had to hide me in his closet in his dorm room because his girlfriend worked at, they had a front desk. We have to check in during football camp. I had to hide in the closet because she was coming through, because the coaches would come through and sometimes they would ask her to do it, which I didn't know at the time that I was his girlfriend, so I was like, what the heck? Or I would have to hide in the bathroom, and one time I had to climb through the window to get in because at certain times at night they lock all the doors in the building, and there's only the front entrance where her desk is at. And I was like, why can't I be a normal person and walk in a building and not have to hide all the time? I was literally so stupid. Literally, I was so dumb. But when I found out, I felt like an idiot, but I kept going along with the relationship because I was like, we've been together longer. He'll choose me over her and things like that. But then it turned into me having to lie to my friends because I looked like a horrible person, even though she was the other woman, I guess, but she was allowed to call him boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. I was so embarrassed of the situation. And then it affected a lot of other relationships I've been in since then, even Michael's and my relationship when we were dating and stuff like that, because we were long distance. I would be so paranoid that he would be talking to another girl or something. It gets in your head. If it happens to you one time, it just it's really hard to overcome and to trust other people from that. Yeah. But it just brings a lot of distrust. And he was nothing. And Michael's been nothing but faithful. He's never given me an opportunity to be like, why were you talking to this person? But it's affected not just me, but other people. And he would call me mom on the phone and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not your mom. Stop doing this. And it just made a huge web of lies. And it's way more complicated than when I'm explaining it even. And it just made life literally miserable. And I felt worthless at the time.
So you want a guy who's going to be honest. You want a guy who's going to be truthful. Proverbs 12:22 says, the Lord detests lying lips, but delights in people who are trustworthy. This personality trait in a godly man is kind of a no-brainer, right? Hopefully, all of you guys in here are going to date a Christian man, so you would think that they're going to be honest. And the truth is, there's a lot of Christian men who aren't honest. And so you want to look for somebody who's going to be honest, because trust is the foundation of every committed relationship. And after a relationship is established, you want to feel encouraged to open up to each other, invest in each other, and eventually commit to each other. And so you have to be honest. You have to be willing to be totally transparent. Broken trust, as she was talking about, is a major deal breaker in relationships. When somebody breaks your trust, and we see this not only in boyfriend and girlfriend relationships, but also in friendships. You want friends and boyfriends or girlfriends that are going to be honest, that are going to be trustworthy. Lying is the fastest way of breaking that trust. No matter how big or small the lie might be, it leaves a nasty aftertaste and makes you question every following statement. So honesty is one of the most important qualities to look for in a godly man or a godly boyfriend.
One of I think the biggest point of what to not have in your boyfriend, future husband, fiance, whatever, is someone who's not aggressive. Sorry, I'm super nervous. A situation that's very real happened to me. And it's not to be taken lightly or as a joke. This is my life, and it's affected me still to this day. I'm going to try and stay emotionless, but it's not going to happen. I just don't want to go into a dark place. I'm probably going to read this word for word so I can keep my sanity. But I've had one of the most horrible situations of aggressiveness from a man specifically ever to happen to me. I'm one of those statistics that you hear about all the time on the radio, and what your parents tell you, and how to be safe and how to keep safe measures. But when I was 21, so 6 years ago, I was talking to this guy. He was from out of state, and he had attended the same college that I went to in Pennsylvania, and we had a ton of mutual friends. But he was just a couple years older than I was, and I found out later that some other situations had happened at college, and he had actually gotten kicked out, but that wasn't explained to me until after the situation had happened. But he had added me on Facebook one day, and I had seen all these mutual friends, and it was the time of Facebook where you literally just add anybody in college and stuff like that, and I just didn't think anything of it. And then he started Facebook messaging me, and I was stupid and responded. I didn't know him. Thought he was safe because he was friends with a lot of my good friends on Facebook. And then he started asking if we could hang out. I was like, we can come hang out. You can come here, and we can go to different locations and stuff and just get to know each other. That's fine with me. And then he would come all the time to Michigan, and we would go to CJ Barrymore's, which is the way upper, nicer version of Squirty Worm, right? That's now closed. But we would go there a lot, and then eventually I felt pretty comfortable to go back to 10 out of 10, don't recommend this, to go back to his hotel, and we would just talk and stuff like that. And then I had just decided we weren't really vibing even as friends, so I had texted him. I was like, hey, I don't think we should be in communication anymore, just because you're out of state and we're not vibing, kind of a deal. And he overreacted, but he had always overreacted to everything. If I didn't tell him I was going to work, even though I went to work Monday through Friday at the same time every day, he would freak out at me. He would call screaming at me. He would call me awful names and tell me I'm stupid, blankety blank all the time. And so I was just I don't want that in my life. And so I texted him, and he's like, well, I'm in Michigan actually, so why don't you come over here and explain to me? And I was like, okay, I'll come. And so I went over there, and he was just not taking it. He went from literally a level of like 2 all the way up to like a 25, and he started screaming at me. He like grabbed me, pushed me up against the wall, and started screaming in my face. He forced himself on me, and then he eventually raped me. And he was just so angry. Like, that's the only thing that he felt he could do, because he didn't know how to properly communicate his feelings. Like, he had lost control. He didn't have control over me. And so he did what he knew was possible to inflict the most pain on me. And it ruined my life. Like I said, he had zero control. He didn't know how to communicate, and without overreacting ever. It led to a lifetime of consequences for the both of us. It was very negative for him, and it's emotional for me. Like, to this day, if I feel trapped or like I'm suffocating or anything, like I freak out. Like, I just can't function in like how I used to be. Like, I just can't. And I just pray that nothing happens to any of you like this, and that you notice the red flags way before this ever happens. Like, I thought I was taking the right precautions by communicating that I didn't want to hang out with him anymore, but it was like too late, and I should have just, knowing how aggressive he was verbally, I should have never put myself in this situation where he could harm me physically. But yeah.
Next one that you want to look for in a godly man is good communication skills. Someone who can be able to talk with you and be able to communicate with you without getting aggressive, without freaking out. Somebody who can explain their feelings to you and what they're feeling in a way that you can understand. Someone who's going to, someone who's going to follow God's tip and is going to listen more and speak less and not act out of anger. That's what you want to look for in a godly man. The next one is you want to look for someone who's willing to forgive, someone who has forgiveness in their heart. In a relationship, there's going to be situations where you're going to be wronged and you're going to feel hurt and you're going to feel vulnerable, and you want to be able to forgive them. They should be able to forgive you. And so if he's not forgiving, it's a sign that he's not compassionate and he's not kind. Because a forgiving man is going to be compassionate and kind. A not forgiving man is going to be rude, aggressive, discourteous. They're not going to deal with you. A forgiving man will be loving and kind and compassionate. And next, you want a guy who's going to have wisdom. So you want a guy who's going to be willing to look for God and seek out God in situations. Someone who's not going to rely on his own experiences and his own thinking, but somebody who's going to rely on God. And lastly, you want a man who's going to fear God. And when I say fear God, that's one of the most important characteristics of a godly man in any relationship. A man can be all of the characteristics that we've talked about or not the characteristics that we've talked about, but if he doesn't fear God, there is no guarantee that he's never going to change. There's no guarantee that he's never going to become somebody you didn't know, somebody that was putting on an act. And so you want to know that they genuinely love and fear God, knowing that God is going to judge our behavior towards each other and see things we do in the dark and encourage us to live a life in obedience. A man whose desire is to please God and not just himself or you is exactly what you want. A man that doesn't take being a Christian lightly, but understands the weight of what it means to be a Christian. That's a man that's going to treat you right. That's a man that's going to have all the characteristics we've talked about. And so you want to find a man that is going to be loving and fearing of God. Like, that's their priority. Their priority is a relationship with Christ, their relationship with the Father, and that is the most important thing in their life. And so that's what you want to look for in a man.